Let's take a quick walk through the Pref plus IRR Waterfall tab. This is a new addition to the MFA-ADVANCED as of December 2025. First thing you're going to notice is in the top, if you have not set the model to the IRR Waterfall, you're going to see this error. So to utilize this IRR Waterfall, you have to go to the Underwriting Model tab. And here you have to change the return model to the IRR Waterfall. Once you do that, you're going to see this text. Use the Pref plus IRR Waterfall tab. Come back over here and you'll see that warning is gone. Quick overview of the model. It's organized very similar to the MFA, where I've grouped everything into categories. We're going to start with the cash flows. Cash flows are identical from the underwriting model tab. You can see these are just links into the tab. It's just to give you a full picture of the cash flows that are going into the return model. Below that, we have the property level distribution summary. This is also going to be the same as the underwriting model tab. It's just here to show you how the cash flows are broken out by a year between operations and capital event. The returns at the project level or at the property level are always the same, regardless of which model you use to distribute the profits. We have a preferred equity section. This is only available in the IRR Waterfall right now. We'll go through this in detail in just a minute. And then below that, we have the IRR Waterfall breakout. This is the distribution of all the cash flows through the IRR hurdles. You can see all that here. We'll cover that in just a second. So we are going to start off in the input section. This is where you make all the inputs into the model. It's broken out between equity splits, preferred equity inputs, and common equity IRR waterfall inputs. We're going to start with the equity splits. It's really only two inputs here. If you have preferred equity, you're going to enter the entire dollar amount in this cell. Everything to the right of this is just informational to let you know how much profit that equity partner is receiving and the returns. If you don't wish to use the preferred equity, you would just set this to 0. And now you're going to distribute all the capital required for the deal between the common equity partners, and that is the LP equity and the GP equity. So here you can see that the LP equity is 90% of this deal, 10% coming from the GP. Total equity required is $27.6 million. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the preferred equity. I'll show you how that is modeled. So again, we're just going to go ahead and put a whole dollar amount here. We're going to say $5 million of preferred equity. As soon as you make that input, you'll see the preferred equity inputs are available for input. You can choose how this preferred equity is compounded, either monthly or annual. You see the origination fee, total preferred percentage. This is the total return required by the preferred equity partner. This is 14%. Oftentimes in preferred equity, you'll see a current pay and an accrue pay. So in this case, we're saying 6% is current pay. This is going to get paid every year. And then we have 8% that is accruing that will get paid on exit. A lot of times you'll see a minimum return hurdle. You'll have this percentage, but they also want a guaranteed minimum return. In this case, we're saying it's a 2x equity multiple. You can set that to 0. And you can see this reflected in the return. So right now, cash on cash for the preferred equity is 6%. This is always going to equal the current pay. They're getting 6% of the cash on operations. Any cash shortfalls will be compounded into the next time period in the model. And then the rest of the returns are here. And you can see they're getting about a 1.7 equity multiple as it's set up. If we set a minimum return hurdle of 2x, you're going to see that equity multiple of 2 represented here. Take a look at the preferred equity section below. So the current pay is modeled in this section. You can see the amount due is being paid by the cash flow from the property. If this were not being met in year 1, you would see a shortfall, and that shortfall would get compounded in the next year. And then the preferred or the current amount due would be based on that new capital amount. It's very common. In this section, you can see the accrue pay is accruing year over year. You do have a couple inputs you can make in here. If you, for example, are modeling a 3-year preferred equity, but they give you the option to extend for 2 years for a fee, you can model that fee here. Let's say it's 1%. You can model that. Also, sometimes they may require an exit fee. So if you have an exit fee, you can go ahead and model that here. And that's pretty much it. You can see this one-time payment getting made on exit to hit the minimum return hurdle here. And then there's the cash flow remaining that will be distributed in the IRR waterfall. Let's get into the common equity IRR waterfall inputs. I'm going to go ahead and change this preferred equity to 0 so we can focus our attention on the IRR waterfall. First thing I'll point out is that this is a 4-tier waterfall, so it has 4 hurdles here, and you can turn off the hurdle 2, turn off hurdle 3, or any combination thereof if you want to bypass any of the hurdles. So if you don't need 4 tiers, you can go and turn any of these off. And what it does is it just takes the cash flow, skips that hurdle, and then goes to the next for the allocation. For our model, we're going to keep them all on. And the inputs are pretty straightforward. There's not many inputs. I think it's important to understand that hurdle 1 is a preferred return hurdle. And in order to hit an 8% IRR return, you have to return capital. So hurdle 1 is always a return of capital and a preferred return. Hurdle 2, you can set at a higher IRR hurdle. So you can see this one's at 8. And then we go from 8 to 12%, and we give the GP a promote. In this case, we're giving a GP a promote of 20%. And what this means is that the GP is going to get 20% of the LP's profits in this hurdle. So in this situation, the GP has already invested 10% into the deal. They're going to get their 10% ownership of the deal plus 20% of the LP's 90%. And that's how we determine the GP percentage of profits for hurdle 2. I have this calculation outlined right over here along with examples, so you can just go ahead and take a look at that and you can model this to see how that works. And then each hurdle is similar, where you set a hurdle rate and a promote. It's very common to escalate the promote as you achieve higher and higher hurdles. The other thing I'll mention is that the GP share of the deal in hurdle 1, we have it set for 10%. We're going to cover 4 different IRR waterfall scenarios where this is used and or not used. I'll show you over here. These 4 waterfall scenarios are outlined. So I have an explanation, a definition, and then how exactly you set the settings to achieve this type of output. But we're going to cover each of the 4 waterfall scenarios right now. Okay, so the first waterfall scenario is what they call Pari Passu. And what this means is that the GP and the LP are equal partners in the deal. Everything is equal. We're not putting the LP first. We're sharing everything exactly in line with the contribution of our equity. So in this case, we have GP is contributing GP is contributing 10% into the deal, and they're going to get 10% of the deal in the first hurdle. When these 2 values are equal, this is Pari Passu. This is how you model it. And you can see this play out in the IRR waterfall section below. So we're going to go look at the first hurdle right here. So hurdle 1, and you can see the LP is receiving a distribution for every year, and the GP is also receiving a distribution in every year. They're receiving the distribution that is perfectly in line with their equity contribution. 90-10 in this case, and both are receiving their 8% IRR preferred return. So that is Pari Passu. Once these conditions are met, the cash available from the deal goes into the next hurdle, and that's where the GP will receive a promote. Okay, the next example I will show you is the LP first. So in order to kind of set up the model to where you're putting the LP first in the first hurdle, all you do is you set your percentage in the first hurdle to 0. So the GP is not going to receive anything in hurdle 1. Everything is going to go to the LP until they receive their capital back and their 8% preferred return. So let's go take a look at this in hurdle 1. So in hurdle 1, you can see LP is receiving cash flows. The GP does not receive any cash flows whatsoever in hurdle 1. So once the LP receives all their cash flows and their 8% preferred return is met, then the remaining cash gets distributed down into the hurdle below. And then that is where the GP is going to get their promote right here. So this is putting the LP first. This is very favorable for the LP. This shows that you are putting them first. You're prioritizing their capital return and a preferred return before you see any money in the deal. The third option is for a GP catch-up. So that is this field. So this catch-up is only available when the GP is not contributing in the first hurdle. So if you'll notice it goes away, the GP is getting share in the first hurdle. But if you're modeling LP first, this gives you the option to catch up the GP in the first hurdle. And what this means is that 100% of the profits go to the LP until they get the return of capital plus their preferred return. Once those conditions are met, then the GP is caught up to the preferred return. So in this case, the GP is contributing into the deal. We're going to catch them up so that they also get an 8% preferred return on the equity that they contributed only after the LP preferred return is met. So let's take a look at the hurdle 1. You can see all of these distributions that have happened are all going to the LP. There's nothing going to the GP. We have a capital event. This goes to the LP. Once they hit their 8% preferred return, then and only then will some cash go to the GP so that they can also hit their 8% preferred return. Once both of those conditions are met, the remaining cash flow goes into the next hurdle where the GP receives their promote. And the last example that I'll give you is the GP does not contribute to the deal. If the GP contributes no equity to the deal, then hurdle 1, the GP will get no distribution. The GP is only paid in this situation based on their promote, and since they don't have any equity in the deal, the promote equals their percentage. So let's go take a look. How does this play out? In hurdle 1, you can see the LP is receiving distribution up to their preferred return. There's nothing going on for the GP. There's no distribution whatsoever for the GP. Remaining cash flow are distributed down to the next hurdle, and then and only then does the GP receive their promote. So I would say that the most common ways to set this up are GP contributes to the deal. GP very unlikely will be pari passu. If your investors are open to it, you can do a catch up. But this LP first model right here where the GP contributes and does not receive anything in the first hurdle, this is the one that I see that is most common, but it's really depending on your relationship with your investors and what they're willing to accept. Let's take a look at the outputs of the model. So just to the right, of all the inputs. We have a couple graphs here just to kind of help you see what's going on. So the way it's modeled right now, you can see that the GP invests 5% of total equity and receives 30% of total profits. This is kind of helpful as you're modeling a lot. Let's say you have preferred equity, you get the GP contributing 5%. You got a lot of stuff going on. It's helpful to understand who's contributing what and who's receiving the profits, and that's the intention of this graph right here. So you can see the preferred equity contributes 18% of capital and they get 11% of profits. The LP equity and then the GP in the dark green. So that's kind of helpful. IRR promotes, just kind of illustrating that promote structure right there. There is a question that kind of came up in my mind when I was modeling this, is how does this compare to a cash on cash preferred return? So that's what the model had before and currently has. I've included a table, and it's not totally integrated into the model, but it's off to the right on the underwriting model tab. If you scroll way over to the right, here you can see the two models side by side. You can see cash on cash preferred return, and you can see the IRR waterfall. And you can see the difference in the returns between the way everything's modeled. And I'll show you what you have to do in the IRR waterfall to get it to match closely to the cash on cash preferred return. So since the cash on cash preferred return does not have a GP equity contribution, you need to first set the GP equity contribution to 0. And it's going to turn red over here because it's saying that, hey, you're giving the GP a portion of the profits even though they don't contribute capital to the deal. So we're going to set this to 0. And then this deal is modeled is that the GP promote, I believe it's around 35%. We'll try that. Very close. So you can see $34 million of profit, $34 million of profit, equity multiple 2x, 2.2. Everything is very, very similar. So that's how you get the two to tie out. One thing I will mention, cash on cash in an IRR waterfall typically trends higher than the cash on cash in the cash on cash preferred model. The reason for that is the IRR waterfall pays down the capital account with every distribution. So I'll show you what that looks like. So in hurdle 1, you can see the capital account is $28 million here. It goes to 27, it goes to 26. And that's because we're making distributions that then are subtracted from the capital account. So lower capital account means a lower baseline from which to calculate the cash on cash return. And that's why you're going to see a slightly higher cash on cash with an IRR waterfall. Feel free to reach out with any questions.